His name has been tied to horrific crimes. He has been demonized by law enforcement and confronted by reporters for provocative ads.
We've run into a lot of victims that pretty much call your site the Walmart of child sex trafficking.
He has even been accused of destroying the newspaper business. You'd think the founder of Craigslist, Craig Newmark, is one of America's most wanted, but those who know him tell a much different story.
Nice, nerdy. There's a Yiddish word, nebbish, and it really fits him very well.
So who is the real Craig Newmark, and what does he say for himself?
Craigslist experience for me personally has not been so much challenging as just surreal.
It has surreal numbers for such a simple site. Analysts estimate Craigslist value could be more than $1 billion. It has revolutionized buying, selling, and connecting for everyday people.
Unlike many of the people who started Yahoo or Google or Facebook, he didn't do this with a grand plan. It just happened.
Like the man himself, Craig Newmark's job description may seem a little unusual for someone who founded one of the world's most popular internet sites.
My job at Craigslist is, literally speaking, customer service.
Safe to say, he may be the most famous customer service rep in history. The company that bears his name is located in an old Victorian in the Sunset District in San Francisco. But that's not where you'll find Newmark.
I roll out of bed, then I'll go down to the local coffee house, Reverie, and maybe do some work. I'll check in on things.
For Newmark, there are a lot of things to check on. With more than 570 million classified ads last year, posted by over 100 million users that span 70 countries, Craigslist is a planetary hub of buying, selling, trading, and connecting. How did it all start? In 1995, on email.
I saw a lot of people helping each other out, and I figured I should give back a little. Couldn't think of much except to share with people what I knew about arts and technology events, eventually talking about launch parties for .coms in '95, that kind of thing.
Christina Murphy of CM Recruiting knew Craig in those early days.
I think for Craig, it was fun for him to let people know what was going on in his little circle, and it really was special to get an email that had information about things going on.
So special that demand quickly overwhelmed the platform.
My distribution list hit around 240 people when it broke.
And what a break it would be. David Vinjamuri is the author of Accidental Branding.
They had to create a website for it, and they had to make it so that people could submit their own listings. And when they did that, that's when it just took off.
All the site needed was a name.
As a nerd, I'm pretty literal, so I wanted to call it SF Events. But people around me told me that they already called it Craigslist.
When you actually get into it, you realize it's about the most functional site on the internet. It's easy to understand, it's easy to use, and it's his personality. It's simple, it's plain, gets right to the point.
Within 2 years, the explosive growth of Craigslist online community bulletin board brought the biggest names in software to his door.
In '97, Microsoft Sidewalk approached me about running banner ads on their behalf. And it was just me then, and I could have lived just on that one customer, because I live pretty simply.
Newmark and his one-man shop turned down the giant, Microsoft.
I figured banner ads are very frequently stupid. They slow a site down. I don't like them. We're not going to do them.
By the end of 1997, Craigslist shot past a new milestone, 1 million page views per month.
Not bad for back then, so I kind of realized, hey, got something going here.
Newmark needed staff, and that meant meeting a payroll. For the first time, he started charging for the service, but only for job postings, and just $25. There was still one big problem, the boss, Craig himself.
In '99 and through, let's say, part of 2000, friends helped me understand the degree to which I suck as a manager. They were right. I remember distinctly, very distinctly, being a nerd in the full stereotypical sense. I really did in high school wear a plastic pocket protector. I really did wear thick black glasses, taped together on 2 occasions before they could be repaired.
Craig Newmark was born in Morristown, New Jersey in 1952. He grew up in a modest home where his father worked as a traveling salesman and his mother a bookkeeper. Relating, for the self-confessed nerd, was such a struggle that his high school counselor gave up and simply taught him chess.
But I was good when it came to science and engineering. That's a lot easier than dealing with people, at least for someone with my limitations. And believe me, I got limitations.
In 1971, his brains won him a spot in a college program for the highly motivated at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. He stayed on to earn a master's in computer science by 1977. After college, Newmark got a job at IBM, working in systems development.
But after 17 years, time for something different. Got Charles Schwab and Company to hire me, moved me out to San Francisco.
2 years later, he was striking out on his own as a freelance software engineer, and Craigslist began its meteoric rise. But by 1999, Newmark's limitations collided with his executive skills. In January 2000, Newmark did something almost no other CEO has ever done. He demoted himself to customer service.
I read some kind of study talking about founders who hung on too long and did some real damage. So it didn't take too much more than a nudge for people to convince me that I should look for someone who was a lot better of a manager than I was.
He founded in Jim Buckmaster, then Craigslist chief programmer, who became its CEO.
You know, the two of them exactly complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. Jim is organizationally focused, he's driven, he's very, very motivated to grow Craigslist, and he has the same principles that Craig does.
Buckmaster would prove an excellent choice. But another decision Newmark made would haunt him and Craigslist for years. The trouble began when Newmark gave away 28% of the company's private shares to an employee named Philip Knowlton.
I gave away shares, gifted them, because I figured, well, if I had too much control, maybe the money would go to my head. The deal is that money changes people, and I don't want to be changed. Not in that sense.
The move backfired. Knowlton wanted to cash in, and his stake was even more valuable because it included one of the 3 seats on the Craigslist board of directors. By 2002, according to court documents, he threatened to sell his position if Craigslist didn't get more aggressive about making money. But Newmark and Buckmaster wouldn't budge. So in 2004, Knowlton pulled the trigger and sold his stake for $16 million to eBay.
That created a huge problem for Craigslist. eBay, a very successful company, great entrepreneurial model, but it has diametrically opposite values to Craigslist.
Citing confidentiality agreements, Knowlton declined to be interviewed. Adding to the friction was the fact that eBay didn't want a piece of Craigslist. They wanted it all. Brad Stone is a senior writer at Bloomberg Businessweek.
eBay loves the classifieds business, and it realizes that it can be a major avenue of expansion. And like all big internet companies, it wants to acquire. And it goes to Craigslist in the US, the dominant player in classifieds, and it says, let us buy you. And Craig Newmark and Jim Buckmaster, the 2 primary shareholders of Craigslist, say, we're not interested.
eBay settled for Knowlton's 28%, but the end game remained total control. The result was more than an acrimonious boardroom. It was a battle for the soul of the company.
Craigslist is a nonconformist, anti-business company. eBay is a public company with the market demands for growth. And so right away, you had a little bit of an untenable situation.
That untenable situation would smolder for years before it exploded. Meanwhile, Newmark and his company were fighting a fire on another front. They were being accused of destroying the financial underpinnings of the nation's newsrooms.
Papers knew that when it came, it would wipe them out or severely damage them, and they just were waiting.
In 2006, the newspaper business was taking a calamitous nosedive. Craigslist, with its free classifieds, was the bullseye for blame. Tom Rosenstiel is the director of Pew Research Center's Project for Excellence in Journalism.
Newspapers have lost 70% of their classified advertising revenue in the last 9 years. Much of that is due to Craigslist. Newspapers used to bring in roughly $19.6 billion in classified revenue. In 2009, they brought in collectively $6 billion, and most of the rest of it is going to go away.
Newmark disputes the connection.
There's an urban myth about the magnitude of the effect we've had on newspapers. Now, I'm not in the newspaper business. I'm not an industry expert, nor do I want to play one on TV.
Tom Rosenstiel is considered an expert. He agrees the problems with print go way beyond Craigslist.
If Craig hadn't done this, somebody else would have. This was going to happen because the technology created it.
For Craigslist, the backlash from the news industry would prove a much smaller problem than the sensational headlines in 2007. That's when 24-year-old Catherine Olson answered a Craigslist ad for a nanny. She went for an interview and was murdered by the man who placed the ad. Craigslist offered support to the Olson family, partnering on a fundraiser for a scholarship in her memory. Newmark even appeared at the event.
I do want to thank the Olsons for inviting me here today, and I want to offer a small personal contribution in support of the good works that are planned for the Catherine Ann Olson Scholarship Fund.
2 years later, another homicide seized national headlines. Again, Craigslist found itself center stage in a shocking crime. Mark Rash is a computer security consultant and the former head of the U.S. Department of Justice Computer Crime Unit.
In this case, Craigslist allowed this person, Markoff, to connect with this woman who was advertising erotic services in Boston. After the two of them met, he then murdered her.
Philip Markoff, a Boston medical student, was arrested for the murder and instantly dubbed the Craigslist Killer. But Markoff's capture was also due in part to Craigslist.
They were able to develop a forensic case linking this person back to this woman. This would never have happened if this happened in a paper ad. While Craigslist facilitated this crime in the sense that it got the people together, it also facilitated the investigation and helped solve the crime.
Anything that's wrong on Craigslist, frankly, pisses me off. I mean, I really get angry on behalf of the victims and their families, and my heart goes out to them. I do reflect that we do have a community of at least 50 million people, mostly in the U.S., every month, and considering that, we actually have a very, very low crime rate. Think of us as a big city of 50 million, and have some perspective.
In the midst of the fallout from the murders, the long-simmering battle with eBay boiled over. All-out war began in 2007 when eBay unveiled its own ad site in the United States.
eBay has introduced a site called Kijiji that could give Craigslist some tough competition.
That led to a lot of tension because now our biggest outside shareholder, our only outside shareholder, is also trying very hard to compete with us.
Craig Newmark and Jim Buckmaster fought back with a reorganization that diluted eBay's share from 28% to 24.9%, just enough for eBay to lose its seat on the board.
They were basically cruelly ejected from the inner sanctum of Craigslist, and they sued in corporate court in Delaware to try to recover that share and recover its board seat.
Craigslist countersued.
There were accusations of using private information for building the new products. There were accusations that Craigslist hasn't been treating eBay fairly, and it's a big mess.
In December 2009, the first suit went to trial. Testimony from Jim Buckmaster portrayed eBay as a bully that relied on its chief, Meg Whitman. Whitman's 10-year stint at eBay saw annual revenues grow from $4 million to $8 billion.
There were two Meg Whitmans we had met and enjoyed working with and had reached an agreement with what he described as the good Meg. But there was another Meg, the evil Meg, and that we would be best served if we got with the program or we were going to meet Evil Meg.
Whitman saw Craigslist as a business asset and countered with eBay's position.
We would have liked Craigslist to have been successful, to have been a great partner of ours, and ultimately we would have loved to have increased our control. We would have loved Craigslist to be, our bet, our play in classified, certainly in the United States.
10 months later, the court issued a ruling. The decision was widely seen as split. The countersuit filed by Craigslist is still pending. Representatives of eBay and Whitman replied by email that they would not comment. For the time being, Newmark's company has beaten back the challenger.
It's unclear to me what eBay gets by suing to increase its share back to 28%. It was a sort of reflexive action to protect its rights, but in the long run, eBay's strategy with Craigslist has failed.
Newmark is typically affable about what he may have learned from the conflict, but not revealing.
I'm very limited in terms of what I can say. Let's say, for many years, I didn't listen well enough to the attorneys, to people who knew business and all that. I do listen a lot more now.
As good a listener as he might be, nothing prepared him for the firestorm yet to come.
I'm not sure when the first prostitution ad appeared on Craigslist, but pretty soon into the new decade, Craigslist realized they had a problem.
For a decade, nearly the entire lifespan of Craigslist, Craig Newmark and Jim Buckmaster had shown little interest in making money.
They're not about maximizing profits. They're not about charging as much as they can. Typically, they are about just what they need.
Craigslist is a private company, so none of its numbers are publicly released. But by any measure, it is very profitable. Classified advertising analysts, the AIM Group, estimate that 2010 revenue for Craigslist was $121 million.
Of which somewhere between $90 and $100 million is profit. Staggering numbers.
As of 2010, Forbes estimated Newmark's net worth at $400 million. That may make him the world's wealthiest customer service rep. But typically, he sidesteps all questions about money, as in this interview with Charlie Rose.
You own more than 50% of Craigslist or not?
No.
You don't?
Correct.
In other words, other people own that. You've given it away or you've whatever.
Could be, Charlie.
Okay, but why are you so
coy?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
But what would matter was a tidal wave of public fury that threatened to destroy the company's reputation. The issue had been building since the very beginning of Craigslist, when the newest global network met the oldest profession.
Prostitutes figured out they could advertise on Craigslist for free. And so instead of being a streetwalker, or instead of trying to be an escort through an escort service, which took a big percentage, they started advertising on Craigslist.
Users who stumbled across these ads in the personals often complained, so Craigslist created a separate free section and called it Erotic Services. Law enforcement took notice and turned on the heat. They pressured the company to get rid of the illicit ads.
They essentially accused them of facilitating criminal transactions.
So in 2008, Craigslist voluntarily signed an agreement with 43 top state prosecutors to clean the section up. Craigslist began to charge for the ads and required a valid credit card. Matt Zimmerman is a senior attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation.
The reason to do that is that you create a paper trail. You create digital footprints that law enforcement can track.
Craigslist committed to donating the money to charity. A number of nonprofits refused the contributions. The change did little to cut the volume of erotic ads, but it did produce another result.
It started making Craigslist a lot of money. Maybe 15 million projected in 2009. They were on track to make 30 to 40 million in 2010, and it was very profitable.
It was also unacceptable to law enforcement officials, who, like Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, stopped threatening and started suing.
To have a business so blatantly be involved in this is outrageous.
In May 2009, Craigslist changed the name of the section to Adult Services and announced that all of the ads would be screened manually. They also said they would make no further promises to donate the proceeds to charity. That didn't stop concerns that the site was increasingly a magnet for underage sex and human trafficking.
There are a lot of groups that are devoted to combating this, and they have charged through their research that Craigslist really became the major venue through which this activity has taken place.
When Newmark is challenged by these groups, he says that he has been out of the company's management for a decade and bounces tough questions back to the CEO with a standard response that goes like this.
Jim is the guy who really knows the stuff.
Or sometimes this.
Maybe Jim to talk with you or something about that.
Well, we tried to ask Jim, but after several emails, he never responded. In August 2010, the socially awkward Newmark was confronted by a CNN reporter where he again dodged the same questions.
What do you think she's selling in her bra and underwear? A dinner date? And she's in her bra and underwear.
Have you reported
What are you guys
this
doing?
to us?
But you guys say you screen all these ads manually in your blog. I just want to know, okay.
Under widespread fire, Craigslist replaced the adult services section with just one word.
And so the company, in its uniquely petulant style, places this censored banner on Craigslist in the U.S. It was clear, from Craigslist's actions that it really felt bullied, that it felt like it didn't really have any obligation to remove this material.
In fact, it didn't.
It's flatly incorrect to say that Craigslist actually had a legal obligation to take this material down. It's very clear in federal law and a very deliberate choice by Congress to take intermediaries and leave them off the hook. If it was the case that every company had to regulate, had to screen every ad or every post that went up on their system, Google couldn't exist, Facebook couldn't exist, and Craigslist couldn't exist.
Less than 2 weeks later, Craigslist bowed to intense public pressure and got rid of its adult services section in the United States and then worldwide, a move that cost the company nearly $12 to $15 million in revenue in 2010. But despite the removal of the adult services ads in the United States, Craigslist remains overwhelmingly, unchanged. And it continues to be a puzzling contradiction in the world of internet giants. Newmark still lives in San Francisco and has been with his current girlfriend for 7 years. He now gives much of his time to nonprofits dedicated to good government and transparency.
It's Craigslist.org, but it's not a nonprofit. It is a private company, but it's also not profit-oriented. It is not very transparent, even though Craig himself is a huge advocate of media transparency. It doesn't exactly look like anything else that exists in our society.
But it does look a lot like its contrarian founder.
Really more true of Craig than anybody I've ever met is that he lives the life that he created, meaning Craigslist is simple, it's plain, it's utilitarian, it does the job extremely well. Craig could be driving a Bentley and living in a mansion by the sea, and his life is nothing like that.
Craig is the quintessential nerd who happened on a happy accident that became a global phenomenon. Unlike many of the people who started Yahoo or Google or Facebook or some of the other big internet phenomena, he didn't do this with a grand plan. It just happened.
It's been pretty easy to maintain a connection to one's values because the idea is that the values are real simple and it's easy to keep repeating them. Treat people like you want to be treated. Now and then give the other person a break. Stay connected with the grassroots. Stay connected to what's real. And nerd values to me say live comfortably, but after that, it's more fun to change the world.